Okay, with all the sanding done, it's time to mask off the fretboard, because that is the one place that I do not want lacquer in right now. And also the nut slot, because that's another place where lacquer is a no-no. Now the best way to do this is to use your fingernail to burnish along the side of the fretboard and the fret. Now, no matter what you do, there's still going to be a little bit for you to clean up later on with a sharp scalpel blade or a scraper. But by doing proper prep work, you'll have very minimal cleanup to do. So this prevents, or the burnishing prevents, any of the lacquer seeping into the fretboard where you don't want it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with lacquering a fretboard. By all means, you're free to do so. It's just a hell of a lot of work to clean that up, or wet sand that and flat sand that. Maple fretboard, sure, the grain is very tight, but something like rosewood, the grain is so porous and open, I'm going to run into a hell of a lot of trouble. Nowhere is it stated that you cannot lacquer a fretboard. It's just a matter of whether you should or not. Now I've made things a little bit more difficult for myself here, because I have scalloped the frets past the 12th fret. So I need to make doubly sure to get that masking tape into the scallops as well. Because talk about a place that would be annoying to try and clean up. That would be fretboard scallops. Now my mind tried to come up with a million different sorts of puns for seafood, but I decided against it, because I am a much better man than that. Nothing wrong with a good pun, but now is not the time. And then trim off the excess using a sharp scalpel blade. And remember to burnish down the end of the fretboard as well, because the very end will get lacquer, but the top of the fretboard won't. So burnish down the edge, or burnish down along the edge. Alright, one side's done, time to do the other side. It is exactly the same process. This is a part that you don't really want to rush. In general, guitar finishing is a part you don't want to rush. Because when you rush, you make mistakes. And the finish is the first thing that a person will see. So you rush the last part of the job, and you kind of screwed yourself. Honestly, don't do it. Now for the middle, which is very easy. Just protecting the end of the truss rod, because we don't want any lacquer in there. And then pressing down so it connects the two pieces of masking tape. Now for the scallops, again, I'm just going to press down to make sure I don't get any spillage. Missed a tiny little spot there. There. And then clean it up. All done and prepped for lacquer. Here we go.
So that's the first thin layer on. What I'm going to start doing now is every half hour I'm going to put on another coat. I'm going to do this for another 3. So this was just sort of like a sealer type thing. And then I'm going to do 3 proper coats of lacquer on top of this layer. Of course, while wet sanding, the weather changed again, so it's a lot warmer out than what it was earlier. I hope that's not going to affect the lacquer. We'll have to see. But either way, you'll see me again when we start sanding that stuff down. Alright, so now we have the first session of clear coat done. And it is time to scuff that back. Again, just going to be using 800 grit, doing the same stuff that I've done before. I don't necessarily need to aim to get this perfectly flat at this point. The main thing for me right now is to get rid of all the little debris. So of course there's going to be, well, depending on what your circumstances are and where you're spraying, there might be some dust particles and whatnot to get rid of. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So lightly scuffing so I don't take away all the work that I've done, but more so that I give the next layer a good place to kind of stick to. So yeah, here we go. Now the first few layers of clear coat that you're going to put on, this phase really doesn't take too much time because you're just doing a very light sand to get rid of any unwanted stuff in your clear coat. Then once you actually start building up the layers, then you start going to a more of a flat surface. Now, if before your clear coat you've managed to already get everything sanded flat, then this part is just even easier because you won't have any nasty bumps appearing on your surface. Now, the best way to always look at your work is toward direct sunlight, because that will show everything a lot better. Natural light will show everything a lot better than, for instance, LED lamps and the like. Another reason why you shouldn't really sand all that much at this point is because it's the first layer of clear coat and you're not going to have all that much on there. So you don't want to kind of strip away the work that you've been doing. There. So now my top is already done. Yep, I've gotten rid of all the specks. It's fairly flat already because I was careful enough to sand it the first time around. So, moving onwards to the back. Now the thing about solid colors is that they will show dirt and unwanted things so much more than bursts and stuff like that. So if you're doing a solid color, bear in mind that you have your work cut out for you. I'm going to keep sanding this, and I'm going to put on another layer and everything else. I'm going to do that a few times over, so until I've built up the amount of clear coat that I will need in order to start doing final sanding. I don't really see a point in showing you every single step because it is literally just repeating the previous steps over and over again until I have a consistent finish that I'm happy with. So I am going to stop this recording for now, and I will return once I've actually put on all the clear coat that I think I will need, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, so now I've gotten the guitar clear coated to the final finish. In between sessions, I've already flat sanded the entire thing, so it's all nice and flat, and done as many clear coats as I can up until the point where I ran out of lacquer, or ran out of clear coat, I should say. And we're gonna go from here. Hopefully we'll be able to get this nicely polished and buffed up from this. So what I'm gonna be doing is, again, I'm gonna use some 800 to start off. And I'm gonna do the same sort of circular motions that you're used to by now from the previous stages. And then I'm going to work my way up the grids. So I'm going to go from 800 to 1200, 1500, 2000, and then 2500. And the way I'm going to do that is first do the 800 in circles, then I'm going to do the 1200 going diagonally this way, 1500 going diagonally this way, 2000 going across, and then finishing off with 2500 going lengthwise. The only reason I'm doing that is that when I work my way up the higher grits, if there are any scratches left from the sandpaper, I'll be able to figure out from what grit I need to go back to. So if I see scratches going diagonally this way, I know I need to go back to 1200, or no, I need to go back to 1500 to work those out. Because if I'm just continuing on doing the swirls and I see scratches, it's a lot harder for me to figure out which grit to go back to. So a nifty little trick. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. So let's get going. And of course on the neck, I can't do lengthwise and stuff like that diagonally and whatnot. I can do that on the headstock, but I'm gonna just go along the neck because it works out very well that way. All right, now the top has a couple of discrepancies about it where I poured in the resin. It's a little lower down at parts like here, and quite honestly, working with rattle cans, it's hard for me to build up that much material. If I was spraying from a gun, I could do much thicker layers, but because it's from a can, there's not much that I can do to build it up quite in the same way. Which is a shame, but it is what it is. Due to the nature of this guitar in particular, it is an experimental piece, to say the least. So, stuff like this doesn't faze me all that much. I'm using natural light to see that I am getting a flat finish. If there's anything else I need to get rid of, I'm moving onwards. This is the same phase that you've seen many times over, or same procedure that you've seen many times over. Except this time around, I'm also going to be doing the roundovers. And the way to do that is to be very, very gentle. Let the sandpaper do the work and don't apply any pressure at all. Because the more pressure you add, the more stuff you're taking off, and you're not taking it off evenly. so you might end up going through, especially in somewhat sharp corners and edges. That's far from ideal. And I'm not doing two big areas at once because I want to keep track of how the work is progressing. So sand away some, wipe away the water and all the excess, and make sure that things are progressing well. Alright, so the top is looking pretty good. What your lowest grit is doing is flattening out all the tiny little bumps and discrepancies and stuff like that. When you start working up toward the polish with higher grits, that's all you're essentially doing. You're working up to a polish. You're not trying to sand away and flatten the material anymore. So I'm going to do this, and then I'll turn the camera back on when we continue on to the next grits. Alright, so doing the first initial sanding, so with the 800 in this case, is always going to take a whole lot longer than the rest of the layers. Doesn't mean that you're going to rush the rest of the layers, it just means that there's less to do. Because with the 800 you're flattening the surfaces, which is going to take a little bit of time, and then with the rest you're just polishing up that flattened surface. So you still want to spend enough time with the paper that you have, but you don't have that much work to do because you're not really removing all that much material. So this is the 1200 now, and I'm going to start going diagonally across. And the thing is that because you're letting the sandpaper do all the work, you're going to feel a difference in your sanding as you're going along. And just making sure that I am indeed getting rid of all the swirls, and now I can just see scratches going that way, which means that I'm sanding correctly. I usually like to do things in quadrants. So I do one quarter, another quarter, and the last one. It just helps me keep track of where I'm sanding. Every time I wipe things clean, I make sure against natural light that I'm getting rid of all the 800 scratches, which I am. So that is all good, and I can continue onwards. So as you can see, this is progressing already quite a lot faster than just in the 800. Be careful when you're going up along edges. You don't want to fall off the edge or break the edge at all. And also, reason why I'm kind of cleaning up the water and residue across that way is so that I can see the scratches going that way. Because I know that the only movement in that direction is just me wiping off the water. So I know that those aren't scratches. Alright, that's done. Now for the last quarter. I'm doing some overlap as well, just so that I'm sure I don't miss any areas. And that is the top done. Now I can move on to the back and the rest. Awesome. Continuing onwards. Alright, so now I'm gonna start the last process. Just making sure everything looks the way it should. And everything does indeed look fine and dandy. So, last step. Now I've done the diagonals. I've done the cross. So 1200 1500, 2000. Now I'm going to do some 2500, just straight along the grain, as it were, to touch everything up. Now, the thing you want to look out for whenever you're doing this process, so sanding, you want to make sure that you're not going through layers of lacquer. You definitely don't want to make sure that, or definitely want to make sure that you're not hitting the paint underneath. When you're sanding, especially at higher grits, if you have gone through layers, you will start seeing parts that are a lot shinier than surrounding areas. That more than likely means that you have gone through at least some layer of lacquer at some point. And now you need to go back and re-lacquer. Because I have lacquered as much as I had, or because I used as much clear coat as I had, I've been extremely careful about this because I do not want to start redoing any layers. So even this, I'm being very careful not to take off all that much. All I'm doing is just taking off the scratches from the previous layer. And again, I should be wiping in a different direction. There we go. I'm not applying all that much pressure because that's not the point here. All I'm trying to do is, again, just get rid of scratches and not take away material. Alright, this is going really well. I'm not seeing any scratches showing up. And of course, because of such a high grit, I'm going to run out of usable paper real quick because I'm, whittling away at the grit. So whereas I would have used 2 pieces like so so 1 piece per part. So 1 piece of this for the body and 1 piece of this for the neck. Now I'm going to have to use probably 2 pieces for one process, or one part of the guitar. So I'm going to need to use 2 pieces of the sandpaper on the body and 2 on the neck, just so I can get everything sanded the way I want. Alright, awesome. That looks good. Moving on to the back. And very important to be using a block so you keep things level. Doing things by hand, you'll just create divots and go through paint or lacquer, which is far from ideal. Awesome. No scratches and no markings to show that I've gone through layers. Great. Alright, I'm going to keep at this and I'll get back to you when I'm done. Alright, so everything went very swimmingly and I am very glad. So now it's time to start polishing. So what I like to use is some auto polish. So this is Auto Glim Super Resin Polish, made in Great Britain. I really like this stuff. You can do different cuts and work your way up as well. I just have this one, and it is ultimately more about what you apply it with. Now, there's so many YouTubers and repair guys and all that kind of stuff that I see using microfiber cloths to do this part of the job, and it hurts every time because they always say that this is a great thing to use, great cloth for this, like polishing and stuff like that, but it really isn't. Microfiber cloths, because of what they're made out of, it leaves so many scratches on the surface, and you always see then the close-up shots, detail shots of these guitars that have been polished up with a microfiber cloth, and they have these tiny minuscule marks and scratches. Those are left by the cloth itself. Instead, what I prefer to use is a soft material like
full, soft, 100% cotton, which works really well and doesn't scratch the surface. I used to have a really nice rag that was used for cleaning car windshields. I've kind of destroyed it now, so I needed to move on to something that I had. So that's this soft cotton towel. It will do the trick just as well. And with polish, there's not much really to it. Shake it and then just apply and buff it up until you start getting a shine. So apply generously. Don't do the entire guitar at once because that's not going to help at all. And then just, yeah, start polishing up. This is where all your sanding makes a difference. If you've done an improper sanding method, if you haven't sanded well enough, if you have scratches, your polish isn't gonna buff up quite as well as you would like it to. And there you can already see the difference that little bit of work made. So yeah, that's quite the contrast now, isn't it? So I apply first with one side and then I buff it up with a dry side of the rag. And again, it isn't a bad thing that you overlap. Kind of makes sense that you would, so that you can get yourself a consistent sheen, consistent gloss all over. So rubbing it on and then polishing it up. And this is where you can really use some elbow grease to get the job done nicely. Make sure that you have a good surface to do this on as well. It does help a lot.
Keep checking up against natural light so you don't have any scratches coming through and that everything looks consistent. And again, I'm doing this in quarters, as you can probably see. Because to me, that just, you get stuck with a certain method of doing things. Start applying it to all aspects, which isn't bad. Keeps things uniform. And you want to make sure that you get rid of all of that polishing compound, because if that has time to set and cure, then you're in for a hell of a lot more work than what you signed up for. You don't need too much, but you also don't want to use too little. That was very helpful advice there, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. Of course, if you have a buffing wheel, this is a hell of a lot easier. But if you're doing stuff like this at home, which is kind of the point with the homebrew build, or homebrew stuff, this is just a good way of doing it. Granted, it just takes more time. Alright, that's the top done. Now, because you've polished stuff up, very, very important that you don't have any sort of excess debris. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put another towel down, just to be cautious. Now on this black surface, you should be able to see the difference the polish makes a lot quicker, or a lot more clear. And also, any solid finish you do is going to be extremely unforgiving. So keep that in mind if you want to do any solid finishes, because they will show scratches more than the rest.
Alright, so I'm just gonna take a swig of my coffee before I continue onwards. So, the body of the guitar is now nicely polished up. It's time for me to move on to the neck. And the neck really is a hell of a lot easier. To polish up because of its shape. And the fact that no matter what, because you have been sanding the neck lengthwise this entire time, it will polish up a little bit easier than the rest in most cases, unless you've done a proper job on your body as well. Not a super big fan of black finished guitars, personally, for the reason that they're always a bit of a pain to work on, but also I always found them a little boring. But in this instance, it's actually looking rather lovely indeed, which makes me feel a lot better. Making sure I don't have any residue, any fingerprints, anything like that, and that everything looks uniform. When you start hearing things squeak, that's when you know that you really got it. Alrighty, so that was the homebrew video on how to get a super nice and glossy finish at home by just using raw materials, no fancy workshop or anything needed. And here we are. Everything worked out just great. So I hope you enjoyed this video series, and let me know in the comments below if there's any other things you'd want to see tutorials on, or anything else you'd want me to talk about. And I'll get right on that. That's about that for me. So yeah, see you guys next time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.